Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on Tuesday, June 28th. As part of our ongoing series of interviews and discussions with candidates who are running for statewide office, we're very pleased today to welcome Sarah Copeland Hanzas to our virtual studio. She's one of the three Democrats who is running in their party's primary to be the nominee for the Secretary of State in the general election in November. She's currently a state representative serving the district that includes the towns of Bradford, Fairleigh, and West Fairleigh up in Orange County, and she served continuously in the state legislature since 2004. She served as her party's majority leader in 2015 and 2016, and is currently the chairwoman of the Government Operations Committee, and in that role, helped oversee the recent redistricting of the state legislature. Representative Copeland Hanzas, welcome to the News Project.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you.
Well, the same, and thank you very much for making the time for this conversation. I guess I'll get us started the same way I've begun just about every conversation I've started in this series of talking to candidates running for statewide office. Why are you running?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm sure the standard one that folks want to know the answer to. And the reality is, I'm running because I fear that democracy is under threat. From intentional misinformation to active voter suppression in other parts of the country, and now elections deniers who are trying to take over Secretary of State's offices in other places around the country. I bring to this role 18 years of experience working through really complicated and complex issues on the policy side, but also I bring with me a lot of experience in managing people, in bringing people together as majority leader, and before that deputy majority leader, bringing people together around those very complex and complicated issues. I would bring a few new things to the Secretary of State's office that I think will help to strengthen our democracy, and those are really informed by my experience in talking with constituents over 18 years. Your job as a state representative is really to go door knocking during the campaign season, but also on the sidelines of ball games, after church on Sunday, or when you're standing in line at the grocery store to listen to your constituents, and they come up with ideas and they express concerns that they have. So there's just two quick things that I would like to talk about in the elections realm, and then probably we'll get to some other things later on in the conversation. One of the reasons why democracy is under threat is because people don't know how to participate in democracy. They don't know how to vet candidates, how to express viewpoints that might be contrary to the person that they're speaking with. I think that we need to reinstate the education and outreach coordinator position that existed when Deb Markowitz was Secretary of State. And that was a person who helped to develop curriculum for schools to engage with young people on how to participate in democracy. And I would ask that newly created position to get out into our communities as well as into our schools and really help people understand how to engage in the democratic process. Because if we don't use our democracy, we are at risk of losing our democracy. And then the second thing that I would do in the elections realm is really inspired by the fact that we have now passed universal vote by mail for the general election. And also inspired by some of the conversations I had while door knocking over the years, where I would knock on someone's door, have a great conversation and say, "Will you vote for me?" And they would say, "Oh, no, I don't vote. I don't know any of the people who are on the ballot. I don't know anything about them." To me, that was a legitimate reason not to vote if you are uninformed. And so I'd like the Secretary of State's office to create essentially a voter guide. Here are all the people that are on your ballot. Here are all the issues that you might be asked about on your November ballot. And that should be provided to people well in advance of the November election, so that you have time with your ballot on your kitchen table, sitting down, researching the candidates, seeing what they say about themselves, and deciding, who you'd like to get more information on so that you can make an informed choice. So education and outreach and a voter guide.
Wow, interesting ideas, and I certainly agree with you. It's really important, I think, to inform voters as much as possible as to who's on the ballot and what the issues are and all of that. I guess I just wondered, what are your concerns about voter fraud or election results being miscounted or misreported? I mean, that's been a subject of a lot of commentary, obviously, over the past 2.5 years or so. Um, is that a real problem or not? Or is that just sort of a made up, phony argument that there's a lot of fraud and elections are not counted correctly?
So I have a great deal of confidence that in Vermont, our elections are safe and secure. And I come to this having spent years as government operations chair and really hearing the reports back from our elections division at the Secretary of State's office on all the safeguards that are in place. And I would say, just to sort of link into my first answer, that people are more susceptible to this misinformation and false allegations about election security when they don't understand many of the things that are already happening, safeguards that are in place to secure our elections. And so what I would say is, we have the voting population of roughly the size of Boston, and we have 245 or 250 local elections administrators whose job it is to maintain the checklist for their small community and to ensure that only people who are on the checklist and valid registrations to vote are able to vote in our elections. And so in 2020, which was a high watermark for Vermont, yay, good job, people, for getting out to vote, we only had 7 allegations of things that were maybe thought to be improper. And following up with them and investigating those 7 allegations that were brought, again, from these local elections administrators, 6 of them were found to be just simple human error. Someone checked John P. Smith when they should have checked John Q. Smith. The 7th of those was someone who had executed their mail-in ballot and then showed up on election day and demanded a ballot. And when that happens, the elections administrator gives you an affidavit, and you have to sign that affidavit swearing that you have not previously executed a ballot. Well, in this instance, the person pulled the affidavit, filled it out, and demanded their ballot, and then on review after the election was found that indeed that person had attempted to vote twice. And so I feel like we have a lot of safeguards in place just because of the smallness of our communities and because our local elections administrators are so diligent and so connected and committed to executing free and fair elections.
Do you have any concerns about that the false narratives about stolen elections will be ongoing? And if so, how do you think we rebuild the trust in the voting process?
I absolutely believe that this narrative is not going to stop. We saw it in 2020 in the lead up to shifting our method of voting so that we could keep people safe during a pandemic. And when we came back in 2021 and made vote by mail permanent, we saw it again in some of the arguments that people were bringing in the process of bringing that bill through the legislature. And, what's really important to me is that we get out there and we really engage with people, give them the opportunity to ask the questions, give them the opportunity to have the true information about how our elections are administered, but also keeping in mind that this is part of an intentional political narrative trying to undermine people's confidence in the elections by people who don't actually believe in democracy. They actually believe in suppressing certain communities from being able to vote, and then they want to disenfranchise or dishearten a whole bunch of other people so that they won't vote. I think that's undemocratic. I think that we need to engage people and meet them where they're at and help them understand how our elections work so that they know that when they get together and vote for the person who they think represents their values, that their vote counts and that their vote matters.
And I just wanted to kind of take this opportunity to kind of have you tell us what will be the differences this year in voting this year in the 2022 primaries and the general election compared to 2020? I mean, then in 2020, ballots were mailed out to everybody. Is that going to happen again this year, or are we going to go back to something earlier?
So I think the main difference that folks are going to see this year that's different from 2020 is in 2020, we knew we had to ramp up quickly to run a universal vote by mail general election that we had never done before. So we needed to make sure that we had the current mailing address for as many people on the checklist as possible, hopefully all of them, although I'm quite sure we didn't hit 100%. But folks will remember that back in early in the election season, in fact, before the primary, everyone got a postcard in 2020 saying, do you want to request your absentee ballot for the primary? And is this your correct mailing address? And that was really not only an effort to help people vote in the primary without having to show up in person, because at that point we were in the middle of a raging pandemic and it was pre-vaccination, and many of our poll workers are older friends and neighbors. We wanted to make sure that people stayed safe. So people were offered the ability to request their ballot in the primary back in 2020. This year, you're getting a reminder card that says, oh, by the way, if you want to vote in the primary, you need to request your ballot yourself. It's not an automatic thing. But for the general election this year, you will get your ballot in the mail, just like you did back in 2020. And the general election ballots come out 45 days ahead of Election Day. And hopefully that gives everyone the opportunity to do a little research and look at many of those down ballot races that maybe haven't gotten the media attention that some of the statewide races do.
I wanted to ask you about ranked choice voting as well. That's been an idea that's kind of seemed like it's bubbling up a little bit. It's been tried in a couple of places here in Vermont. If you were the elected Secretary of State, would you be an advocate for that? Or would you be saying, well, maybe, but we're not quite there yet?
So I would be an advocate for that. In fact, this year in the legislature, we thought we were going to be receiving a bill to move to ranked choice voting for the 2024 presidential primary. And then all of a sudden, close to the end of the legislative session, the bill didn't move out of committee on the Senate side as we thought it was going to. I do support ranked choice voting, and I think that the 2024 presidential primary is an ideal place for Vermonters to see how it works, to participate in a ranked choice vote election. It's an ideal place because it's a ballot in which there are always more than two candidates. It's not just one Democrat and one Republican in that presidential primary. You're going to see all sorts of minor party candidates. And so it's an opportunity for people to exercise their democratic rights and also choose not only their first choice, but their second and third choice as well. So I do support it. I will advocate for that to pass through the legislature when we get back into session in January. And I look forward to engaging in Vermonters on whether and when to move beyond just the presidential primary.
I mean, on one level, it sounds like it introduces a level of complexity into the voting process, which would be kind of sounds like it's going in the wrong direction. But my understanding is that one of the arguments in favor of it is that it would also tend to take some of the vitriol out of some of the political rhetoric that occasionally goes back and forth, because a candidate running for office might not be someone's number one, but they might be somebody's number two if they don't kind of go off their lane or whatever.
Right.
Is that, you think, one of the arguments in favor of the ranked choice voting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty logical if you think about it. If you and I are going head to head in an election and I'm trying to convince people that I should be their first choice, but I also want to convince your supporters that I should be their second choice, you don't want to do that attack, that head-on-head dirty politics, because while that might appeal to the candidate's core supporters, it's probably going to offend people who are inclined to support other candidates. And so hopefully this removes that and allows us to just come forward with our best ideas and engage with voters on the issues as opposed to personality conflicts.
And what about voting by folks who are not yet 18 or not yet U.S. citizens to allow them to vote in local elections, like for school boards or select board or whatever? I know there are a couple of communities around the state that now currently allow this, but I guess it's very much of a local decision. What do you think about that? Do you think that's something that should be encouraged further?
So as chair of government operations, it was my job to take a look at those local charter changes that came to our committee that were passed overwhelmingly in those communities. And we vet charter changes for their constitutionality, and is this a good idea to move forward with a particular change. These two charter changes we vetted very carefully, and indeed we were told by our legislative council that the things that these communities were asking for were absolutely legitimate. And I want to talk about each of them individually because I think that they're very different and distinct from each other, but also want folks to understand why it's a good idea. So Montpelier and Winooski moved forward with allowing non-citizen permanent residents of their communities vote in local elections only. And that really came about from years and years of elections administrators in these communities hearing from people who said, look, I live here, I have a business here, my kids go to school here, I pay my taxes here, I own a home here, why can't I vote here? And so, the pushback that we heard in that process was, well, if you want to vote, you should just vote, in the country that you came from, or you should just become a citizen. And, the reality is, for a lot of people, they come from a country that doesn't allow dual citizenship. And the thought of giving up their home citizenship in order to be able to vote here is something that prevented them from moving forward with getting United States citizenship. We really supported moving forward with allowing people who are living in these communities, who are ingrained in the communities, who are raising their children in these communities to be able to vote in their local elections. Now let's go to 16 and 17-year-olds voting. This was an initiative that was passed in Brattleboro that, by the way, was vetoed and was not enacted into law. So Brattleboro does not currently have the ability to invite young people to participate in local elections. But this was really a youth-led movement, and I think that's fabulous. If you're talking about trying to strengthen democracy and trying to get more people engaged in participating in democracy, what better way to do that than to invite your young people, while they're still living in their homes, while they're still in school, to have the ability to vote in their town meeting. It's a great way to get started participating in democracy. It gives real life lessons that the teachers can use in their civics education curriculum in schools. It gives the opportunity for young people to learn how to discern between candidates or on different issues by talking with their parents at the dinner table. This is how I learned how to engage in democracy, was by arguing about politics with my family at the dinner table. But the reality is that, if there aren't those real life opportunities to participate in democracy, a lot of families don't make the time to talk about the issues at the table. So I support 16 and 17-year-olds voting. I certainly hope that Brattleboro will put this forward again next year, and that the legislature will move that forward. And as Secretary of State, I would support it. Because I think it's a great way for people to engage in their communities.
Okay, well, let me just pivot to a couple of the other areas that the Secretary of State position involves. And one of the other roles of the department is to, I guess, oversee business regulation. I guess I was just wondering, was there anything on your radar in that area that you think, well, if I'm elected, I want to do this to make it easier for somebody to incorporate or start a business here, or something like that?
Yeah, so most people's interaction with the Secretary of State's office is through that corporation's portal and through registering your business. But you know what I've noticed after talking with people who've been in business for a long time, and having operated a business for 11 years myself, I interacted with that portal a lot in the first couple of months that I was setting up my business. But after that, it's just an annual renewal. And I have to say that the website gets pretty high marks for its accessibility and for the way the Secretary of State's office has created links between that business registration that happens in the Secretary of State's office and the other places where someone might need to get a license or an ID number, such as the tax department or the Department of Labor. And so it really is a one-stop portal for people who are setting up a business, and I think that's a great thing. I think there are a few things that I've heard on the campaign trail that make me want to look into it a little and make sure that that the system is working as smoothly as we want it to. I talked with someone who started a business midway through 2020. So this was the pandemic. Many offices were closed. Most people were not shopping in person, and so it was. It's a wonderful time to start a business, and I just thought it was wonderful to hear this person's story because it sounded really inspirational. She had an idea of how to bring people together in her community, and she was going to move forward with it, pandemic or not. But the business type that she was trying to register, for some reason, wasn't allowed to register through the portal. So during the pandemic, she actually had to drive to Montpelier in order to file her paperwork. So I'd like to look into those little things that I hear from people. And I think it's really important for us to talk to new business owners as frequently as we can, because those are the people who have the fresh experience in their mind, and they might be able to inform us in how to make the system work even better. I'd like to see our business licensing also do a better job of tracking a bit of the profile of the people who are starting that business, because I know that there are a lot of people in my circles who would like to do business with a woman-owned business or with a minority-owned business, and previously we have not tracked that information, so there isn't really a way of knowing which businesses identify as employee-owned or women-owned or minority-owned, and so let's make sure that we make that information available to folks.
Exemptions to the public records. I was surprised to find there were 260 exemptions out there to the Public Records Act. That sounds like an awful lot. Is that something you think ought to be reviewed and maybe thinned out a little bit, or maybe modified somehow?
So yes, the Public Records Act is terribly complicated, and I can understand, coming from the viewpoint of a citizen legislator, I can understand how it got that way, because citizen legislators are not, we work for 4.5 months, 5 months out of the year. And then we have to go back to our paid jobs in most cases. And so it is challenging for the citizen legislators to come together and open up that box, that mishmash of exemptions, and really bring some sense or reason to it. And so I think it's going to be important for incoming Secretary of State to work perhaps with incoming Attorney General and other statewide elected officials to have a process where we put forward a proposal, as opposed to just saying to the legislative committee, you go figure it out in 4.5 months.
Indeed. I can't help but wonder or ask, as a state representative, you were very deeply involved in the whole push last year for, with the Climate Council and on the climate control bill to reduce state emissions. And off the top of my head, I guess there's not a direct tie-in between the role of the Secretary of State and that environmental area that let's say the Clean Heat Standard was aiming to make some headway on. But Is there an overlap there, and one that you would like to kind of delve into to help push that forward, even though that bill wound up being vetoed and the veto not overridden by a single vote?
Yes, that was a frustrating day. And
painful memory.
A frustrating day because I was instrumental in bringing together legislators to move forward with the Global Warming Solutions Act, which, oh, by the way, we had to override the governor's veto on that as well, in order to set that into law to require Vermont to finally meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets. And the very first big and complicated issue, the clean heat standard that came out of the Climate Council, was also vetoed, which really is entirely frustrating. And it's why, I guess, at the very core of it, what I want to say is, Vermonters, it is time to elect more statewide leaders who wake up every day thinking about how we're going to meet our climate goals. Because if we have to do this in fits and starts only when we can get a supermajority to override a statewide official who is the lone voice in state government saying, no, we shouldn't do this, that's no way to meet our climate goals, and that's no way to treat our children's future. And that's really why I get up every day and think about ways to meet our climate goals. So what does the Secretary of State's office have to do with that? Well, a couple of things. Number one, youth voices were critical in helping us pass the Global Warming Solutions Act. And we need to make sure that youth are engaged and prepared to vote in elections when they are old enough to vote and participate. Because it's these people who have to live on this earth for the next 75, 80, 100 years. And it's these young people whose futures, honestly, are in jeopardy if we don't meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets. So engaging in voting is critically important. I also would, as Secretary of State, engage with the Youth Council. This is a group that of youth leaders that was established by a bill that passed through my committee last year. And the Youth Council, by statute, is supposed to report to the legislature and the governor. As Secretary of State, I would also invite them to report to me and to come to me and talk to me about what they see, what they want their statewide leaders to work on, and how can we make Vermont a better place for you. And so the third thing that I would say about climate-related issues within the Secretary of State's office is many consumers are looking for ways to do business with professionals who know how to help them meet their climate goals. So whether you're looking for an architect to help design a really efficient building for you, or you're looking for a forester who can help you maximize the carbon sequestration of your forest lands, or maybe you're looking for a home improvement contractor who knows how to build a well-ventilated, well-insulated home that you would be able to heat with renewable energy. We need to help consumers find those professionals. These are all professionals who are registered or licensed with the Secretary of State's office. And so I think the Secretary of State's office can help Vermonters find the qualified professionals who can help them meet their own climate goals.
Thank you again very much, Representative Copeland Hanzas, for making the time for our conversation today. Really enjoyed it, really appreciate it. And well, good luck out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much.
Perhaps we'll see you after August 9th.
I hope so. I suspect I'll be in your neighborhood before the August 9th primary, but let's just remind folks that you can vote today by going to your town clerk's office, or you can call your town clerk and ask to have your August 9th primary ballot mailed to you, or you can go to your My Voter page on the Secretary of State's website to request your August 9th primary ballot. So I hope I'll see you all soon.
All right. Well, thanks again. And thanks to all of you who've been watching and been with us this morning. I hope you found our program interesting, and well, we'll see you again the next time. Meanwhile, have a great day.